As everyone knows, it's been a pretty short week, so I'm really just going off of Wednesday and Thursdays today. I'm doing it today and not Friday because I'm very excited about what happened today. Sorry, pretty tired. Um, I introduced my unit project today to my students, and the majority of the class, I was worried about planning this lesson today because a lot of it was just explaining, sitting down, having them really listen and digest what their responsibilities will be and what I'm trying to have them accomplish. Trying to get the so what across to them. But I actually found some ways that I think changed it up a little bit. I decided that I was going to, with my unit project, what I'm doing is I'm having my students create their own radio show via podcasting. And because I'm teaching a cultural poetry and short story unit, and so I'm really just trying to get them to be familiar with other cultures. It's really interesting because one of my groups, I have about 5 groups of in each class, and one of them includes a student of mine who is from the Philippines and just moved here at the end of the last school year. And the rest of his classmates, or group mates, decided that it'd be really cool if they used his culture as a culture that they wanted to be familiar with. And at first I'm like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of the project for him. But then I was like, this is a great opportunity for him to be able to teach, his American classmates, if you will, what it was like for him, because this really isn't a place he's very familiar with, and it gives him a great opportunity, to talk about himself and his culture and his family. He even demonstrated for me the type of language that he speaks at home, and even though I couldn't understand any of it, it's just so neat for them to be able to experience or a first-hand account of a different culture, and it really just shows them the so what of my unit project right there in front of them. It's just that there's so much that they can learn from other cultures, and it's neat for them to be able to realize that they can even learn from their peers, which is actually something I stressed a lot in my interviews in Colorado. Was they asked how I would incorporate instruction, not only differentiating it, but implementing different instructional strategies. And I was like, the one thing I really want my students to learn is that their peer can teach them so much about life and just about what they're learning, because they're on their level. And I think that's something that is really important for students to understand. And another reason I'm excited about them choosing my students' culture, who's again from the Philippines, is because they recognize that it's a neat opportunity for them, and I applauded them for that, because just for them to be, open-minded enough to see what it's worth, I think was really cool for him to experience, and for my classmates and myself as well. But back to the project, with what I did in the lesson plan, instead of having them just sit there and just me explaining it, I tried to demonstrate it for them. So I brought in a flip camera, and I showed them how it works. First period, I made the mistake of letting them see how touch it, and that's just horrible. So I took it. I changed my mind within 6 kids. I'm like, no, this is not gonna work. So I took it back, but I didn't do that the rest of the class. That was just me kind of wanting them to get a little too close to what was going on. But then I brought my computer and my speakers. Well, I always bring my computer, but my speakers and everything to class today, because I wanted them to be able to understand the impact of what they'll be doing and why it's so much better than just writing a paper and turning it in my opinion. I downloaded iTunes because I don't even have an iPod. I'm so far behind. Well, actually, I had one. I broke it, but it's nothing to do with this right now. But goodness, so tired. So we worked on iTunes, and I showed them, they're really familiar with iTunes, so that helped a lot. And then from there, I played them the Radio Willow Web, one of the second graders podcast from Nebraska, because a lot of them were like, well, I don't know if I can do this because I've never really worked with this kind of technology before. And I was like, yes, you can. I promise tomorrow I'll show you that you guys are fully capable of doing this. And they thought the podcast was, funny because what the kids kept saying. And but they kind of understood more from that example. And I really liked that they respected the idea enough. That's something I really realized today, is that the students respected what I was doing in the classroom. Not always respecting me, but at least respecting the idea and the so what behind the project. I'm a little worried about the appropriateness when it comes to them talking about their cultures. Not that they're intentionally being offensive, but they just might not know it. So I stressed that a lot today, and I think that's something I'm going to have to keep reiterating. They're such good kids. It's just they're young, and sometimes they just don't, I keep telling them that people are going to be listening to this podcast, but I don't think they really understand or have grasped that concept yet. But otherwise, today went really well. I got them moving, and another thing is what they're doing, the podcast, is they're choosing a culture, and then an author from that culture, and then a piece of literature that author wrote, and they're pretty much writing a 5-minute script, each group is. And I decided last night that I was going to let them choose their cultures. I knew it was going to be difficult for them because they had struggled with really what was culture and how it relates to them and how their culture defines them. And they struggle with that, but then I thought to myself last night, I was like, well, they're struggling with it, so the only way for me really is to challenge their thinking further. And if I just keep assigning them and guiding them, then I think that's just going to hinder their learning process of cultures in general. So majority of the groups decided pretty easily, but then there were the ones that I had anticipated that struggled with, I don't get the concept of culture in relation to literature. So I reiterated that pretty much small-based instruction to the certain groups because some were struggling, and I had, like I said, anticipated that, so I was fully prepared for that kind of those kind of questions. But other than that, I'm really excited because they are, and they had the same worries, though. It was really funny. They were like, well, I don't want people knowing my name, and I don't really want to put myself out there. And I explained to them, I try to make it as relatable as possible. And I was like, you guys, I know exactly where you were or where you are. I was there 2-3 months ago. And yeah, it's scary when you haven't used it before and you don't know the outcome. But I promised them that everything was going to be okay, and they didn't have to use their names. They could come up with names or characters depending on how they write their script, and then they felt better with it. Some even wanted to put it up on YouTube, but I decided that YouTube might not be the greatest route for my students right now. And with the whole showing faces and my ability, I just decided to scratch that idea during the first period when someone brought it up. But anyways, that's pretty much how Thursday went. Wednesday was a little difficult, really, because they struggle with the concept of culture, and I don't think it's that they're not surrounded by it. I just think it's that they don't really realize what culture is. A lot of times, my first question and warm up was like, when you hear the word culture, what do you think? And a lot of them said religion, which is, a valid answer. And then some of them kind of struggled, and I showed them a clip from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when it's Carlton's culture versus Will's culture. We all know Philly versus the rich Hollywood lifestyle of Bel-Air. And I was like, that's even a difference in culture. It's not necessarily race or religion-based. Culture can be anything. It can be the music you listen to. It can be the food. I mean, it's anything that you surround yourself with in your environment. And so I think they're starting really to understand what's going on. Due to the snow days, I had to rush the introduction because I have to end my unit by the 27th. So I feel like some things are getting a little rushed, but then again, that's teaching, I guess, and you just kind of have to go with it. So overall, I'm really excited about what my students are going to be able to accomplish, and tomorrow's a day in the computer lab, so we'll see how that goes. But overall, I'm really loving it, and I hope everyone else is too.